Hey all, Luigi here with another video. So this will be a continuation of my video series based on my conversation with Silly. I'll have the link to the first part in the description for those who haven't seen it. But in this video, we're going to be drilling down into squad compositions. Going to talk about some general things you want to consider with squad compositions. Going to talk about mixing squads, if, when, and how you should mix squads. Going to talk about some additional variations of squads and positioning that are pretty powerful, and then lastly, we're going to talk about missile squads and talk about some of the different positioning you can have with missile squad and why missiles are so powerful. So let's get right into it. For those who have seen the last video, we talked about your squad's power versus like actual combat results. And one of the big things that you can do to influence the outcome of a battle is your squad composition. And your squad composition is going to include the heroes in your squad, the gear on those heroes, as well as the positioning of those heroes within the squad. So one thing I want to go over briefly first, because I don't think everyone is aware of this, is just talking about the way the attacking works in this game and the position on the board itself. So the way that the game works is the heroes generally attack left to right. So in this case, Carly here, since she's in the front left position, is going to be the first one to get attacked. And as well as when I say left to right is also front to back is the other rule. So front left is always going to get attacked first. And there are obviously some exceptions there with some of the skills that heroes have and whatnot. But so it's going to be this, and then followed by your other front liner here, and then it's going to go back left, and then middle, and then back right. So this back right spot is generally considered the quote-unquote safe spot because this is theoretically the last hero that would die. Okay, so that's just like how the positioning works in terms of attacking in the game. Now, let's talk about another kind of general rule with regards to squad composition. A lot of times, right, especially with 3v3, right, in 3v3 you have the ability to set up your defensive lineup, and one of the things that Silly has observed is that if you are thinking too much about defense and you're trying to think about ways that you won't lose, it's actually a lot worse for you. It's better to think about the way that you can win as opposed to avoiding losing, and especially with gear, like gearing to defend is just not a good strategy. And same thing with squad positioning and things like that. If you're thinking about ways to not get defeated, it's gonna hurt you. And it's I guess like it's easier said than done in certain aspects, right? Like if you are on the top echelon of folks in the top 10 or whatever, you're constantly facing the same people, right? So you can take a look at their squads, what they're running and all of that. And on top of that too, the attacker already always has the advantage, as those of you who have played the game know. When you are attacking someone, the defender can't do anything. They can't change their lineup in response to your attack, right? Well, it's set, but you can change your attacking setup based on what their defense is, right? So like if I challenge someone, I can move my squads, change my squads based on what they're running to defeat them. So that's kind of like a general thing is think about ways that you can win as opposed to thinking about ways you can avoid losing. So just something to consider there. Now let's talk about mixing squads. So one of the observations, and I agree, that Silly had mentioned, is that mixing squads should really only be done by those who are very powerful. And it makes sense if you think about it, right? Like if I go to a squad, and I talked about this in a previous video, but as you know, depending upon your squad composition, you can get, if you have five of the same type, you get 20% increase. And as you start mixing and matching, that increase drops lower and lower. And as you may know, if you saw my previous video, that percentage is probably a lot higher than what's actually displayed here based on the actual combat that you're taking part in. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because once you start reducing this number, this 20%, to 15 or 10 or 5, when you start spreading your stuff around, what you're doing is you are increasing your effectiveness against players that are lower power than you, right? Because now instead of having one or two strong squads, you have three, decently strong squads. So that means that people that are the same or higher power than you now are going to have an easier time against you than those with lower power. So that is kind of the overall rationale of why mixing isn't really great unless you're very powerful. And on top of that, right? Like I'm middle of the pack. I have like one really strong squad, one squad that's like decent, and then my third squad is like way far behind, right? So if I start mixing and matching, I'm giving up the power that I have on my one squad and making it a lot lower because the other stuff doesn't help as much. And on top of that, right, you have the chips that only affect certain squad types. So if you're adding in something else that isn't part of that chipset, they're not benefiting from the chip. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why mixing isn't always the best option. So, but if you do mix, what you want to do is it's always going to be 4 and 1, right? So you're going to have 4 of one squad type and then 1 of the other. And the general rule is that you would take the lowest DPS or utility from that squad and replacing it with the counter of your counter. All right, and that's a little bit of a brain twist there, but what does that mean, right? So if I'm looking at my missile squad, for example, my lowest DPS right now is Shiler here. So I would remove Shiler. And all right, so what counters air? Missile counters air. So what is the counter to missile? It's tank. So I would take my highest tank DPS, which in this case would be Kim, and I would put Kim in my air squad. Right, so that's the way that the rule works with the counter to the counter. So you do the same thing for for tank or for missile. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the 4 and 1 strategy. Now there are some other interesting variations that can work. So I'm gonna jump over to my tank squad here, and if you think about something similar. I could drop Marshall and I could add in a couple options. I could add in Lucy. So this is like a triple defender composition. And what does this do? 60% I think of the damage dealers in the game do energy damage. And Lucy obviously reduces and for those who don't know, I have another video on heroes where I talk about this, but Lucy reduces the energy damage that your whole squad takes. So having Lucy in the back row here as a third tank, constantly increasing the energy damage reduction of my squad is really a good thing to have and can allow you to your squad to live longer and do more damage. So this is one variation that also can be something that can work. And I just want to caveat all this, right? When you're mixing and matching, or when you're thinking about putting your squad together, everything is situational. It really depends on who you're facing. There's not, like, again, when it comes to defense, the attacker always has the advantage, right? If I run this squad on defense, an attacker could say, all right, let me put all my physical damage dealers in here to wipe this stuff out. So just want to throw that in there. Now, another option, instead of Lucy back there, is to put in McGregor, right? And the reason McGregor is good in this comp is because McGregor taunts a bunch of heroes on the other team, and McGregor also takes less damage from aircraft heroes, which is what counters tanks. So again, you can have like a triple defender setup where McGregor is in the not the safe spot in the back row, but the back left, and McGregor will basically survive longer and be taunting the other people on the other heroes on the other squad that you're facing, and therefore your front row is going to live longer, and therefore your Kim can live long and do a bunch of damage. So that's the rationale and how this lineup would work. And the last kind of interesting variation that we want to talk about is, don't want to put Kim here, let's put Charlie here. So is actually D.Va in the front row. So this really only works against tanks, if you're facing tanks. But this is a way that you can beat much higher tank squads than yourself as a aircraft squad. Now, aircraft already is better against tanks due to the synergies, but the reason that you can put D.Va in the front row and why this is great is A, you have Lucy will live longer, will therefore put more damage, energy damage reduction on the entire squad. And the other thing is that heroes in the front row attack 10% faster. And this actually stacks with D.Va's exclusive weapon, if you have her exclusive weapon to 10. So if I were to pull up D.Va and go to her exclusive weapon 10, you can see that for each aircraft in the squad, D.Va's attack speed increases by 20% for 4 seconds. So that 10% is additive. The 10% bonus that front row heroes gain is additive to that. So that's something that you want to consider. That's something you would only want to do, again, if you're facing a tank squad. You would not want to do this against a missile or facing another air squad, because it's not good. Just because those squads, right, like Morrison does a lot of physical damage, missile squads do a lot of physical damage, and so therefore D.Va's not really getting protected as much from Lucy, and so D.Va would die pretty quickly in that situation. So those are the few variations that I wanted to talk about in terms of positioning and mixing squads. So now that that's all said, let's talk about Missile Squad. So Missile Squad is the king, right? This is the strongest squad in the game, and it's also the hardest squad to get in the game because it's not the heroes don't unlock until later, especially if you're free to play, so you'd have to spend more to get a full missile squad going. Now, the reason that Missile Squad is king, and Missile is actually also pretty darn good against the counter, which is tanks. And it really has to come down to a combination of things, really. But first, let's talk about Adam and Swift. So Adam has a couple of very interesting skills. So he has this one, Spike Armor. So in battle, reduces all the damage received by front row units by 8%, and it's doubled for missile vehicle heroes in the counter defense state. And then he's got this ability, counter defense, where he enters into a counter defense state. And when that happens, you basically do a normal attack when you take damage, once per second, right? It says there. And when you get him to 4 stars, this means that the heroes in the front row also receive the counter defense state. So as you may have seen, for those who have higher end squads, you'll actually see something like this. Adam will be in the back left in the safe spot, and Swift will be up front. And what this does is that means that Swift will get the counter defense state on himself. And then the other thing that makes the synergy really good is you have McGregor. And as we discussed previously, McGregor taunts the heroes on the other team, right? So this is the skill here, Unyielding Heat. You can see he prioritizes taunting 2 front enemies, and also reduces their attack. And when you get him to 4 stars, it also 2 stars, and then 4 stars, it increases that to 3 and 4 heroes, right? So now he's taunting 4 different heroes, instead of just the front 2. So that's big, right? And that is what allows Swift to really survive a lot in the front, because he's getting the damage reduction from Adam, as well as the taunting from McGregor, and so that allows Swift to take a lot less reduced damage. And the other thing that happens here is Swift himself prioritizes attacking the lowest health hero, HP percent. And all those things in combination means that one hero is going to die very quickly on the other team. And the hero that dies on the other team doesn't do any damage. So this is why this whole combination is very good, even against tanks. Even though tanks counter, right? And so that's the reason there. And one thing that you can do, especially once Tesla gets the exclusive weapon, is some people even put Tesla in the front row, or might even be both Swift and Tesla in the front row, and having McGregor and Adam in the back. And again, for those reasons, and having Tesla in the front, the reason Tesla is very nice is because all of Tesla's attacks essentially hit the back line, right? They hit the back row heroes. And so it's very powerful, right? Because the back row heroes are the ones that are usually doing the damage. So if they die faster, that's gonna increase the chance of you winning. So yeah, missiles are definitely the king in the game, the most powerful squad that you can get, and it's because of these combinations that I'm describing here. And as you can see, missiles are my weakest squad, so I definitely have a lot of work to do here to get that up. So anyway, that is everything I wanted to discuss on squad composition. If anybody has any other suggestions or comments, definitely put feel free to comment on the video. The next video I'll have, in the last one with regards to this series, is going to be on PvP, how you should approach Arena 3v3, Desert Storm, Winter Storm, and Capital Wars and things like that. So that'll be coming in a few days or so. So anyway, thanks for listening, and